Hello, everybody, and welcome to our second module of Infusionsoft Advanced. Let's just jump right in and take a look at our agenda for today. We'll do our usual housekeeping. We'll take a minute to review what we talked about in Module 1, which was all about referral partners. Then today we're going to talk about action sets, follow-up sequences, purchase actions, and billing automation. So really the automation pieces that make Infusionsoft so powerful. So this is how you can take all the information that is in Infusionsoft and you can automate it to do so many different things. And so we're going to start with action sets. And action sets and follow-up sequences are also part of campaigns. So we'll be looking at those again. Obviously, purchase actions, billing automation, that has to do with the shopping cart piece. Okay? And then we'll do our homework. We'll have our Q&A. So we are on Module 2, and as we know, we have 8 modules, and those 7 modules of training, 1 module would be just a live Q&A course. For those of you who are not coming or not planning on coming to any of the live sessions, please feel free to send us an email at help@techymentor.com. With any questions that you have so we can make sure they get asked and answered at the Q&A call. You can also post in the private Facebook group, and you can also send any issues or questions to help@techymentor.com. There will be additional resources added to the library. I'm working on some other documents that I will be giving to you over the course of the next few weeks. The homework is also placed in there. Hopefully everybody has had a chance to access the practice sandbox. Now remember, the sandbox is only available to you during the course itself. So once we're finished with that Q&A call, the access will no longer work for you. So I really suggest that if you don't have access to your own Infusionsoft or a client's Infusionsoft just to kind of poke around, that you take your time and get into this sandbox. This is a safe environment, which means if you delete something, it's not a big deal. All right? So Module 1, as I mentioned, was all about referral partners. And referral partners are the affiliates, the affiliate piece, if you will, of Infusionsoft. You can set up the different programs, and the programs are the different programs that you're going to use to promote your affiliate program. So a program would consist of the percentage that you're paying somebody on either a sale or a referral. You can also pay on leads, and you can also pay on you can even do things like pay-per-click and all that kind of stuff. So you can get really deep into that. You can just have one large program. You can also do exceptions, and those exceptions would be the one-offs. So my advice is to actually create a default program, if you will. For the majority of the items, the percentage you're going to pay, the dollar amount you're going to pay, and then you could just do the exceptions, either the exceptions for the product, and there are also settings for you to determine if you're going to pay for subscriptions, and if you're going to pay for subscriptions, how many payments are you going to make. How to add, update, and view your referral partners. And most referral partners are come through a web form that is usually on a website. It could be on a website, it could be a hosted form. That you put out there to allow people to sign up to be part of your referral program. A lot of times people will create specific web forms for like an event. If they're really looking to sign people up at an event, you would also use a web form for that. Resources are your promotional resources, like your images, your banners, any emails or broadcasts or audios or videos, any of that kind of stuff that helps your affiliates, in this instance, again, referral partners, sorry. You'll hear me go back and forth between that. Those are the resources that allow your affiliates to promote your product, your services. Your tracking links, those are the links that your referral partners want to use in order to get credit for any sales or leads that come from them. So it's very important that they have the correct tracking link and understand how they're used. How you pay your affiliates, and then just to set up default. So if you haven't had a chance to look at that, it's a great thing for you to take time to look at. It's not difficult. There's just a lot of moving pieces to it to really get a solid understanding of how it works. Again, if you have questions, you know where to find me, Facebook group or help@techymentor.com. So let's talk action sets. And what is an action set? It's a set of actions that are used together. So it's pretty self-explanatory. But when it comes to Infusionsoft, there's so many different actions that you can do. A lot of times you think of an action as just sending a broadcast, right? Or applying a set of tags, but there is so much more you can do with an action set, and they can be very simple or very complex. So I think the biggest thing with action sets is that most people don't take the time to plan out what they're going to use them for, right? They're just like, oh, gee, I really should do this when this happens. And for instance, let's say your client's going to be doing a big promotion of some type, right? Maybe they're doing a product launch. One of the things that you should do within the product launch is really think about how you're going to need to use your action sets and also follow-up sequences, which we're going to talk about next. The more time that you spend or your client spends planning out your action sets, the better you can automate. And this session's all about automation, right? How to automate all the things that you can do within Infusionsoft and put to use the power that you have with this automation. So it can be one action, it can be several actions. It just really depends on what it is you're trying to accomplish. You can use them with web forms, right? A lot of times when you put up a web form, there's an action that happens. And you have to realize there's a ton of system-generated actions. And I'm going to show you where these are all stored. The system-generated actions are the ones that Infusionsoft creates. And I'm not talking about Infusionsoft people, I'm talking about the system creates those. So there are things that happen when you click on the purchase button, right? All of those are action sets that are created by Infusionsoft. You can create your own action sets used with a web form. So for instance, if somebody signs up for a specific free webinar, right? Well, there's a couple things you probably want to do. One, you probably want to apply a tag so you can, keep track of where they are within your system, right? Remember, tags allow you to segment and group your list. Two, maybe you want to send them a broadcast that says, okay, well, here you go, and here's what you need, so on and so forth. Now, you could send them one broadcast, or you could set them up on a follow-up sequence. And a follow-up sequence is just like an autoresponder message, right? You can have one or several, right? Maybe you want to follow up on a specific date. Maybe you want to create a task. I mean, there's so many things that you can do. So you can see the beauty of actually sitting down and planning this out. And this is where clients will come to you to say, okay, well, I need to follow up with my clients to do X. And you're like, okay, well, we can use an action and a follow-up sequence. Now, the other thing you have to realize too is that this is a legacy feature. So action sets are what is considered a legacy feature. And that just means it's something that could at any time disappear. Action sets are actually part of campaigns. So before campaigns were what they are today, several years ago, they were just action sets and follow-up sequences. Both of those features are part of campaigns now. So that's what I mean by legacy, okay? These are things you can also use in a campaign if you're using campaigns. If you don't want to use campaigns, you can just do a straight action set, and that's what we're going to look at today. We'll look at campaigns coming up in another module, but we're going to just look at how to use these legacy features, because a lot of people who've used Infusionsoft for years know how to use these legacies features, and I don't like campaigns because they're so big and they can be a little overwhelming. So again, action sets are used with web forms, order forms, purchases. They're system generated, which means there's tons of them. When you see our list of action sets, you're going to see there's many of them. You don't want to delete any of those, by the way. Leave the system generated ones alone. And they are also considered what's a legacy feature. Now, a legacy feature really means it could go away at any time, but I've been using Infusionsoft or working in Infusionsoft the last probably 3 to 4 years, and it was a legacy feature back there, so it's not obviously going anywhere. So as I mentioned, have a plan on how you're going to use your action sets. And this is something where you can work with your clients to really say, okay, we're going to be using an action set. What is it that you need to do? And kind of maybe list the things. So like I said, send a broadcast, apply or remove a tag, start or stop a follow-up sequence, because you can start and stop follow-up sequences, and you can create a task. So with that said, let's pop over and have a look at our action sets. And action sets are under the CRM piece under settings. And they're in the bottom under general. So I can click on action sets. And these are all the action sets that we have. Now let me make my screen a little smaller, because I know sometimes it gets a little big. Okay, so here's our action sets. Okay. Now you can see that I have 64 action sets, and this is just a sandbox, and all of these are not the ones that I've created. If you'll look through here, what you can see is obviously the ID, Okay, ID is, the older the number, or the lower the number, the older the action set, the higher the number, the newer it is, right? The name, and what's it linked to? So this is what it's actually linked to. It's linked to a form. It's linked to an opt-out. It's linked to a campaign. It's linked to an order. So can you see in here, if you look at all of these, you're going to notice they say custom form web : 4, activity history template : 1. These are all system generated. Do not delete these. I do not recommend that you edit them either. You also have to realize that when your client or even yourself sign up for Infusionsoft, they're going to set up a lot of these of different campaigns, especially when it comes to things like sequences, which we're going to talk about, our nurture sequences, customer sequences. Those are all set up during the implementation of Infusionsoft. So a lot of this stuff is either system generated or has been created when the implementation of Infusionsoft happened. Okay. So you can see right here, WordPress training number 1. This is one that I created. Okay. Can you see the difference very easily in this number versus this? So these are ones that have been created by the user. Okay, you've obviously got 2 pages. Okay, you can also see here's one, number 9. So anyone that just has a plain old number is one that you created in the system, you or your client created in the system. The rest of these are all going to be what are called system generated. Okay, so I'm going to pop back to the first page. You can do a search very easily up here if you want to search for them. Okay, if you have a lot, we have 64. You also have actions that you can take here, right? So I know that I want to use, here's my WordPress training one. I'm just going to click on edit. Remember, you can click on edit of any of these. Please don't edit any of the system generated ones, because those are ones that Infusionsoft needs to do its job. Okay, you can see that this is linked to number 1. In other words, it's not linked to anything at the moment. I haven't completed this whole story yet, but you get the idea. Actions, what does this do? It applies a tag called WordPress, and it also adds it to a follow-up sequence. Now, when I click on add action, do you see, let me move this box up a little bit so you can see more. Can you see all these actions? I can apply, remove a tag. I can start or stop a follow-up. I can send an email, fax. I can assign a contact to a user. I can create an appointment, a task, an opportunity. I can change the field in a contact record. I can create a referral partner, right? So if you're doing a form, a web form to create a referral partner, this would be an action that you would want to happen. And that is a system generated one. Apply a note, cancel a subscription, right, a membership subscription, run another action set. So you can actually chain action sets to each other. Share, distribute, send an HTTP post to another server, which would be your API calls, copy actions, and create an order. So you can do all of these different things with an action set, and you can chain all of these together. So let's say that I wanted to add an additional sequence to this. You can see it applies a tag, kicks off a follow-up sequence. Maybe the next thing I want to do is also create a task. So I click on create a task and it says, okay, from here. And remember, each action is going to give you a different set of options to choose from because they're all related on to what it is that you've asked the action to do. So I can say, okay, is there any templates that you want to use? I can choose a template, right? Or I can add a template if I want, right? So here's a template. So you see all the different ways that I can care. So I can do a task template real quick. So I can say, team task. I can choose it's public or private. I can put merge information in there. So there's my merge fields. I can choose the type. Okay, so this task is to do, let's say a call. Okay, and this will be a follow-up call. Be sure to follow up with the prospect to see that they are registered for our event, or whatever you want to say. Assign to contact owner, yes or no. Assign to backup, so you can actually, give somebody a backup. When does it due? 5 days. Okay, what time? 12 a.m. in 5 days. Is it your priority? Do you want to pause the follow-up sequence until complete? Yes or no? Well, I can say, yeah, pause it. Until this is done, the sequence is can continue to run because there may be things that come up after this task is done that reflect or talk about the call that this task is creating. Okay? Do you want a pop-up reminder? Do you want to notify the owner, right? You want a reminder 30 minutes before it's due. Okay, this, and then I can say yes. So this is a template, right? Okay, so now I have that template. And then the other beauty about action sets is you can do rules. And if you know Ontraport, these are similar to the rules that they have in there. This is kind of your what if, right? Your what if question. Well, what if this, what if that? So you can choose any action set to run with a rule. Now, I have a test rule, but I can actually create a rule. Okay, and this is where you set your criteria. Rule is true when blank of the criteria are true. Any of it, none of it, or all of it. So I can say, well, any of it. So the difference between any and all would be and, any would be or. So if you're familiar with writing if statements, there's an if and an if or. If and means they all have to be true before something happens. If or means it's either or. It's either one or the other, okay? And then you can say none as well. So those are your options, okay? And then I can create my criteria. And my criteria is basically what am I looking at to run this test, right? What am I looking at to determine whether or not this is going to happen? So from here, I can choose the contact field. So you're looking at a field now. I can say, for instance, if, I don't want to do additional information. Let's just make something. Let's just say your contact us comments starts with or ends with or contains, does not contain. So you can see this ignores, or excuse me, equals, does not equal. I can say contains the word call, right? And you can do multiple criteria. So I could do another one. Let's say that, and their city is Phoenix. Okay, I can say, so basically what I just did here is what I set up a rule, and a rule is nothing more than a what if statement. Okay, what if this or what if that? What do I do if it's true? What do I do if it's false? Do I have to look at more than one condition, or is it multiple conditions and I can choose which one? So with this, I said follow up, rule is true when any of the criteria are true. So when the contact's comments contain the word call and they live in the city of Phoenix, and I can save. Okay, and then I can save and close. And now you can see that this action set will only run when this condition is true. So you can see that you can get very specific in your action sets as to what they do. So you can see here now it says I have the tag, I have the follow-up sequence, but run the following actions when any of the criteria are met. So you can see that. And then I could go on to add additional actions. So I could go in here and say, I want to create an order, right? So you could do it now. Obviously, this isn't available because we don't have a working payment gateway, but you could get the idea. And then I hit save. Now, I haven't actually assigned that to anything, which we will do here in a minute, but you can see you can get very simple or very complex when it comes to working in an action set. Okay, so real quick, let's walk through how to actually create an action set from scratch. So I just edited an existing, but I can click on add an action set. And then again, this is where it's key to map out exactly how and what you're going to be doing. And are you going to be using a what if statement, which is that test, right? And if so, what's the criteria for that? So naming my action set here. So this is for a live event. And then here's my actions. And remember, you can chain actions together. So the first thing I can say is apply, remove a tag, right? And I can go through here and say, well, is there something in here? Remember, you have different categories of tags. You have nurture tags. And a lot of these, again, are set up when the implementation of Infusionsoft happens. So I can hit create a new tag. And for this one, I'm just going to say live event. I can choose a category, and I'm going to say they're a prospect. And I'm going to create. Okay, so now I'm going to apply this tag. Again, notice that I can actually run a rule. So you can run rules or those what if statements on any of those different actions that you have. So this one I'm just going to say go ahead and do. So I hit save. Okay, so there's a first action. And then I can obviously edit it and I can also remove it. I can add a second action. So maybe the second action is to assign a contact to a user. So I can go in here and say you can assign contacts to one particular user, you can distribute. Actually, that doesn't make sense. Let's not do that one. Let's say I want to, you can set a contact for, well, let's just do something easy. Let's just do send an email. Okay, so I can send an email. You could also do fax, all these other options, right? Here's where you can choose your templates. You can also edit and add from here and then save. Now, I obviously did an email with a specific template. Now, that may not be what I want. I go, well, wait a minute, I don't want a template. Okay, or maybe I went ahead and I actually created the email. So I could actually go in here and choose, okay, I want this, and then I want to edit it to add the specifics, because if you don't add the specifics, then it's just going to send the default template out, right? And so you're going to want to come in here and make whatever changes you want. So you're going to edit the email body. Remember, you always want to use the drag and drop builder, not the HTML version, because what happens is if you use the HTML version, then you can't go back to the drag and drop builder. So let me just make that a little bit bigger so you can see. So I could come in here and I could actually, remove anything. Now I'm just going to take stuff out. So I would go in here and put the information about my live event, right? And then I would go ahead and save it. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here, but you get the idea. And then I would close it. And so there's the email body, right? And then I could just save it. Remember, you can save and send a test, which I always recommend that you do, but just for time's sake, I'm not going to do that. Anytime you create a broadcast or any kind of something that's going to go out to the client, whether it's a voicemail, a fax, make sure you save and send a test, because you want to make sure it looks the way you need it to. Okay, so now I went ahead and edited that. And then again, I could choose some rules, right? Or I could add a new rule. Just showing you again, right? And then you create your criteria, so on and so forth, okay? I don't want that, I'm going to delete it. And then save. Now notice here with the action set, I also have visible too, which means you can actually hide this so nobody else sees it. So if it's an action set that only you want to see, or you don't want it to be visible to anybody else, you could hide the action set, or you could just make it visible to yourself. So that means Daisy and Donald can't see it, okay? Or I could actually choose us all and save. Okay, so now I've created an action set, and you can click on these fields at the top, to change the order. Now remember, even though these are blank, you don't want to delete those, okay? So which one did I do? Live event. So here's my live event. I click on edit, and it brings it back up. And I can at any time go in here, and I could choose a follow-up sequence, for instance, which is what we're going to talk about next. But you can start and stop these, and you can restart, and you can, again, do your rules, right? So maybe I decide I want to do a different tag, and maybe I want to remove a specific tag if they sign up for, I want to remove that. If they have that free webinar tag, I want to move that and give it to the live event. Okay, so that's how you can create your action sets. And now when it comes to action sets, there's a couple things you need to know as well. They run in a specific order. So when you're looking at an action set, there's this list of actions that you have here. There's a precedence to the way this runs, because you could have multiple actions chained together. There is an order, if you will, that they go in. So they trigger based on the type of action. Even though you add, let's say, apply a tag first, that may not be the first action that actually triggers based on how Infusionsoft is set up. And I'll show you what those rules are, okay? Now, we've created our action set. Now let's actually put it to use. So just real quick, I'm just going to run over to marketing, and I'm going to jump over to legacy, because believe it or not, follow-up sequences are also considered a legacy, but so is a web form. Because all of this stuff is, anything that's considered a legacy is actually now part of campaigns, okay? So here's a web form. So let's just add a web form real quick. A live event. And you can create one, you can copy. So I'm just going to copy one. Okay, so here's my web form, nothing big, okay? And from here, obviously I can test it to make sure that it works. So it pops up, okay? But here's my actions. So here's where I can go in and do the actions. So the action set, I can hit the drop down and I can do a couple of things. I can actually create an action set here, or I can copy actions from a saved action set. So I can click on this and I could say, okay, I want to choose the one that I did for live event, and I can copy these. See? So now it does that. Or if I want to add something specifically to this web form, like create an appointment, assign a contact, apply a note template, I could actually do that. So I could create a note template and I could actually do a note, so on and so forth. Oops, and I'll just remove that one, but you get the idea, right? So this is how you would go in and put an action on a web form. Okay, so that's actually putting it to use. It's under the actions, and you can either do the individual actions, but if you have an action set already created, you could just copy it and put it right in here. Remember, you can chain actions to each other, okay? Same thing with this, you notice I have the ability to run actions after contacts confirm their email, blah, 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 so that would be your double opt-in. So there's all these fun things that you can do. All right, so I'm just gonna save that. All right, so we already talked about having a plan. We also talked or showed you real quick on assigning them. So you can actually assign your action sets to a form or even a sequence. Now we did a web form, but you could also do an order form. You could also do it as part of a follow-up sequence. So a follow-up sequence could also have action sets in it. So this is where the power of that whole automation comes into play. As I mentioned, here's the rules that action sets follow. In other words, this is the order. It doesn't matter what order you put them in or what order you create them in. This is the order that they run according to Infusionsoft. So contact field to a specific value, assign a contact, create an opportunity, stop a follow-up, stop a campaign, start a campaign, and then all other actions run in the order they were created. So you can see that there's a specific list here. Now, if you're not doing any opportunities and you're not doing any contact information, then probably don't need to worry so much about this. But if you're curious as to why something is running the way that it is when it comes to an action set, especially if it's chained to more actions, this will tell you why. So just some real quick tips on action sets. Map out your plan of action because there is so much that you can do with this. And remember, at the end of one of the things we do at the end of this course is we take everything that we've done and we actually put it into what I call a mock project. So I actually create kind of a project for you to follow, which will include action sets and everything that we do in this course. You can define the rules, which what if scenarios based on set criteria. You can use that or not. So if you want to get really specific on your automation, you can actually define a rule that goes with your action set. Don't edit or remove any of the system sets. And I'll give you an example of what a system set looks like or an action set looks like. You can also choose the visibility. And remember, it's a legacy feature. It is part of campaigns. So you actually can use action sets in campaigns. I'm showing you kind of the legacy option because we're going to be doing campaigns later on, and we'll be grabbing and talking more about those in that section. Okay, so the next thing we're going to talk about is follow-up sequences and how follow-up sequences are basically the same as an autoresponder series or an autoresponder that you would have probably seen in any other email marketing tool, One Shopping Cart, even Aweber. Hello. Where were we? Oh, we were talking about follow-up sequences. Sorry, got sidetracked. So a follow-up sequence is similar to an autoresponder, as I mentioned, and autoresponders are something that you would see in One Shopping Cart or Aweber or MailChimp. Basically, it's a response based on a trigger, and the trigger could be somebody purchased something, somebody signed up for something. It's the same idea, and follow-up sequence can also be part of action sets. Okay. So these are all, remember, talking about the automation pieces of Infusionsoft. A follow-up sequence includes the following things, what are called completion actions, which can be an action set or something similar. So there's a lot of different actions that you can take. They also include categories, and the categories are normally set up by the people who implement Infusionsoft. So those categories are user-defined or they're Infusionsoft defined as well. You have different options that you can choose. And again, you can set up action sets, and your action sets, remember, can chain to additional action sets. And these are another legacy feature. They are also part of campaigns. So remember, as I mentioned earlier, legacy features are something that's been around for a long time and that people don't really want to get into campaigns, can still use these bells and whistles without having to learn how to do a campaign. So jumping back over here, and where you're going to find your follow-up sequences is under marketing, under legacy. I don't know why my screen is doing that. So under marketing, under legacy, where you found your web forms as well. Those are another legacy feature. You have your follow-up sequences, and you can add or copy a follow-up sequence very easily. But you can see that I have one here, okay? And as I mentioned, you have certain categories. Customer, nurture, and prospects are the common ones that you see. You can add additional categories as well. And what happens is a lot of times when you implement Infusionsoft sets up these sequences for you that are part of a campaign. So for instance, a new customer would get a set of sequences, right? And the sequences can be messages, but they could also be action sets. A nurture sequence is someone that you're trying to nurture into becoming a paying customer as well as a prospect. Okay. And then you also have the ability to look at your statuses. There are different statuses. So there's active and inactive, and then of course your actions. Now I have one here, and I'll just jump in and have a look. So here's my sequence steps. You can see that I only have one sequence step, and most of the times your follow-up sequences are going to be a series of messages. Now, you don't have to do a follow-up sequence. You could just do an action and send out a broadcast if you want. But normally what a follow-up sequence is for a series of related messages. So similar again to an autoresponder. But you do have the ability to do the one-offs, which would be your action. Okay. So you can see here I have one. It's scheduled as soon as possible. It's an email and it's ready to go. Okay, I have my completion actions. So you can see here I'm applying a tag. So when I'm using follow-up sequences, I can use just actions or I can use an action set. And the difference between action and action set is actions you can apply one at a time. Action sets are when you use those same set of actions over and over again. So you would be able to apply that here and then some options. So we're going to create one of these real quick. We're going to click on Add a Follow-up Sequence. And as always with anything in Infusionsoft, you want to be descriptive when it comes to the name. Okay, so this one can be for live event follow-up. And description, be as descriptive as possible. Remember, if there are other people who are using Infusionsoft, it's always a good practice to make sure that you have included a description so they understand what that sequence was for if it's not self-explanatory. Okay, remember I talked about categories. Now you have to put it in a category or you can add a category. These are the ones that come again with Infusionsoft. You can also define additional ones. So I could say, well, this is a prospect sequence. And then I can create I can create a sequence by copying an existing, which is nice. If you use the same type of sequences, you can just copy. But for this, I'm just going to hit create the sequence. And it takes me to here. So what's your first step? Remember, send, print, run some actions. That would be your action set. So I want to send an email. And which email are you going to use? I'm going to create a new email, or I'm going to use an email that I've already created. So I can create a new one. Right? And when do you want to send the email? Send the email as soon as possible. Now here's where you can choose your cycle, if you will. X days after the person is added to this follow-up sequence, X days before an event, X days before or after a holiday, X days before or after a date in the person record, or on a specific calendar date. So you have a lot more options in here when it comes to follow-up sequences than you normally do in some of the other tools. When Shopping Cart now has the ability to do date-based sequences, so this has some of that power as well. Normally it's usually as soon as possible. Okay, so we'll just leave that one. So in other words, I want it to go immediately, right? Opens and clicks for as soon as possible emails will not be oh, excuse me. I don't know why I'm reading that. Ignore that. Other steps. So I can choose whether it's active or inactive, and I can track how much this costs me to run. So I can actually put a dollar figure in here and track the amount of money it costs me to run this entire setup, okay? So I'm going to save and create the email, which will bring up a little pop-up window here. Remember, I asked to do that. So here's my email. I can say live event follow-up number 1. Okay. I can say okay, you can put your merge codes in there. You can choose your HTML. And then you can go into the drag and drop builder. And you can, I'm not going to spend a lot of time in here, but you'll get the idea here. Let me make this a little bit bigger. Choose my layout. choose my style. So maybe I want to do this one, right? And then I can go in here and make whatever changes I have. I can insert all my good stuff, save this, and for time's sake, I'm just not going to create something any more fancy than that and close it. So I would obviously add my text and all that stuff. Now, when you're going to add text, remember you don't want to copy and paste directly into a Fusionsoft because it can cause some issues. Always copy and paste using a third-party tool like Notepad for PC users or TextEdit for us Mac users. Okay. Oops, I see the Techie Mentor spelled wrong. I'll have to fix that. All right, so from here, I have the ability to do, I just want to do HTML. You can do both. There's your spam score. Again, always want to save and test. And when it's ready to go, after you've saved and tested it, you can choose that to save or yes, excuse me. And all right, so there's my first sequence. Okay, and then maybe I want to do another one. So I'm going to go ahead and use an email that I've already created. Actually, you know what? Yeah. I can go in here and I can edit this or I can add. Now, you know what, let me just do another one real quick. So I'm going to create a new email. This time I'm going to say as soon as possible. X, how many days to wait before executing this step, okay? I can also do X days before an event. I can do X days after a date, after a holiday. So for this one, I can say X date after this, they've been added. So let's say 5 days. So that means 5 days later, they would get this because the first one kicks off immediately. Then 5 days later, this would run. And then you always have the ability to choose if you want to run it on a specific day. So I can choose day of the week. And if I want to just go out on and not worry about the date or the time, I'm going to uncheck that. Otherwise, I can choose those options. Is this active? It's an active step. And then so I'm going to save and create. And I'm just going to create another one here real quick. So maybe this is my follow-up number 2. Oops. Number 2. If I can spell, right? And then I would edit, and I'm not going to edit that just for time's sake. And you want to make sure to change, always when you create any kind of templates or email, you want to make sure that you are ready to send that. Okay, so there you go. I have my 2 sequences, okay? And then I can add another one. I can say, okay, well, what I want to do now is I actually want to run some actions. And here's where I can choose some additional actions, right? What actions are you going to run? Are you going to create a new actions or are you going to grab one that you already have? Okay, so you can choose either of those. When do you want to run the actions and so on? Now I'm not going to create a new action, but that's another option for me. And then you can see I can also print a letter, so on and so forth. Okay, so that's good for now. I just want to send out those 2 emails. My completion actions is where I can do something like adding a tag. Okay, so let's say, do I have a live event tag? I do. I'm going to add that. Okay, and then I can go in and add another. Now here you can see I can start and stop a follow-up sequence. I can add, I can create. I can also go down here and choose another action sequence. I could choose to copy something from an action sequence. Okay, now obviously there was only one thing in there and then I could remove that. So when it comes to completion actions, these are similar to an action set, except these are singular. If you want to run a set of actions that has already been created and mapped out, and the reason you would do that obviously is because it's ones that you use over and over again, then you would want to choose a set of actions. So I'm going to go back here. Hopefully I'm not confusing you. Right? So if I want to run a set of actions, I can choose to copy the actions from a save set in order to keep me from having to add them one at a time. Or you can do run another action set, which is you're chaining these together. So I could say newsletter. Okay. And again, I can do specific rules. Okay, so now I have apply the tag, an action set, so on and so forth. And then the last thing is options. Okay, now here's where I make sure I have the right sequence, and then I can choose, this is where I can activate and inactivate it. And then these are options. Track who opens the email template. right? Use this follow-up sequence to follow up regarding an event and create merge fields that are specific to this follow-up sequence. So I can actually say, you know what? I can actually use this sequence and I could create a sequence that goes out on a specific date that follows up to a live event. And I say, okay, well, this is perfect because my live event isn't till October. And so I'm going to say, okay, let's set it out on the 12th. Okay. And then I can save. And there we go. Now, your sequences, your follow-up sequence, are a lot of time attached to web forms, order forms, and those. So similar to what we have here, or excuse me, what we did on action sets. All right, so here you can see that I have two. So you can see live event, free webinar, and prospect. Now, see how it says number of people here? This will actually track the number of people who's currently in the sequence, right? So in other words, the people that have actually signed up through that, for that live event through that web form. And so we're going to take a minute and run over here to view a web form. Let's grab. So here's our live event web form that we already created in the last section. My actions. Okay. Now I'm going to remove these two because I don't need them anymore. And I'm going to add an action, which is to start or stop a follow-up sequence. And you can start or stop a sequence. So I want to start the live event follow-up sequence, and then you have some other options. By the way, you can create a new sequence in here as well. Restart sequences if the person is already in them, which means it'll start over. Resume the sequences if they've been paused, or only run this action when certain criteria is met. So I'm just going to let it run. I'm going to save it. And so now I've done this. Now, once again, when you have your web form, you have some additional options here. So let me save this. Okay, and let me test it. So I'm going to go in here, put in my and it tells you this is a preview form. You can test it by after you fill it out, you'll be saved, blah, blah, blah. Okay, submit. Okay, now that's the default form. Thank you form, but there you go. Okay, so that's how I can actually attach it. Now I attached it to a web form, but you can also do an order form. Remember, a web form you can publish and put on a website. Okay, so going back under my follow-up sequence. Okay, it hasn't actually kicked off yet because I told it not to kick off till October, if you'll remember. But that's how you would add that. And maybe I'll just do one here for the free one here. So let me go into my free webinar one, actions, and I can do start a follow-up sequence, free webinar, save. I'm going to save it, and I'll test this one. Okay, done. All right. So you get the idea of how that works, and I go back to my follow-up sequences. Now, again, it's not instantaneous, but you will see when we come back and look at this probably tomorrow or in our next class, you'll see that there's actually one person in here. So it does kind of track people that go through the sequence. Okay, so jumping back over to PowerPoint, we just talked about the different categories. Prospect, customer, and nurture are all the default ones that are set up within Infusionsoft. Remember, you can also do user-defined sequences, or excuse me, user-defined categories. Okay. You have to forgive me, I'm kind of spacey with all my allergy medicine as of late. You can assign, just like we assigned action sets, we can also assign follow-up sequences to web forms, order forms, campaigns, and you can also assign it to and chain it to, if you will, an action set. Now with action sets, you can copy the actions or you can actually chain it to an action set. So some follow-up tips on follow-up sequences. Make sure, just like when you were working with action set, you want to make sure that you're mapping out your follow-up sequences too. And the reason I say that is because it really does make it easier if you kind of understand the goal that the client has in mind. What's the end result that you're looking for? Well, I need to apply these tags. I need to send out these broadcast messages. I need to create an opportunity. I need to create a task. That's going to kind of give you the idea of either how the follow-up sequence worked as well as the action set works. You can schedule them to go out by a specific date, like you saw me do for that event, October 1st. And they're also part of the legacy features, but they're also part of campaigns. And again, we'll look at those in a little more detail. And the other thing that I wanted to show you real quick was that you can also work with action sets and follow-up sequences by contacts. Okay, so you can actually go to your contact screen and you can actually do, let me just do a little search here. Oh, don't have anybody in. Hot leads. There we go. So we have 68 hot leads. I could actually go in here and let's just see. Well, let me just do a search. Let me search for myself. Okay, so you can see I'm in here several times. So I can actually do an action set in here. So I can click on me and I can actually click on a couple of me, right? And I could go here to actions and you can do an action set here. So I could also start and start and stop a follow-up sequence. So you can do sequences from here, and you can also do action sets from here. So I could easily click on an action set, right? I could choose the action set. I could add a new one. I could add it, or I can run another action set. So this is how I could chain them together. And I could go in here and I could say this is a nurture. I could edit this. I could hit save. Right? And then I could also do, so that's the only one I have, okay. I can also do process action, okay? And so you can see that it's actually running the actions here. So this is kind of your status page. So I just wanted to point out that you can also do web forms and order forms, but you can also do contact records as well, okay? So let's talk purchase actions now if we can. So what's a purchase action? Okay, so we've talked about action sets, we've talked about follow-up sequences. Well, purchase actions really have to do with purchasing. And they're actions triggered by the following. A contact is created, a successful purchase has happened, a failed purchase, an error on a purchase, or a purchase of specific products. So these are specifics to purchasing, right? To anything that has to do with the shopping cart, if you will. The other things that we're looking at, the action sets and the follow-up sequences, can be things that have to do with the contact record, not necessarily with any type of specific purchases. So jumping back over here, and I'm going to head over to the e-commerce platform, and I'm going to go under Actions. And under Actions, you'll find your purchase actions and your billing automation, which we're going to look at here in just a minute. But Actions, these are the default settings. So on login, on contact creation, successful purchase, failed purchase, and error purchase. And you can see each one of these has an action. Now I need to tell you that it's a best practice or a very good practice to make sure that you have some type of action, especially on the ones for successful, failed, and error purchases. Then that way the client would know, hey, it didn't work. Or they get an invoice, or after a successful purchase option. If they get an error, they get an explanation of the error and so on. So this is just great follow-up or feedback to your customers who are trying to purchase and something isn't happening. Either it did go through or it didn't go through. So each one of these has a specific action button. So we'll just go to this successful purchase action and click on action. Now you can see it says this action set is linked to order approved purchase template. Okay, so this is an action set, and this is one of the system action sets that you'll see when you look at that long list of action sets that we looked at when we started. So this is one that you don't want to delete because it is linked to a system provided or system created action set. But you can add additionals, like I can do a successful purchase. And again, I can do any of these things. I can add a reply, add or remove a tag, start or stop a follow-up sequence, send an email, all of these things that I can do. I can run another action set. I can even create an order from here. So with a successful purchase, okay, I can simply apply a tag, and I could also send out an email, right? I could send an email that has, for instance, now we'll talk about invoices next week, but you could actually send out an email that says, thank you for your purchase. So it's almost like you could do a follow-up sequence, which would be, I would think would be multiple messages. But if you just want to say thank you for purchasing, you could create an action that does just that. So I can go in here and I'm just going to choose a welcome email. Same thing, all of these you can always run test, you can save. So now when somebody purchases and it's successful, which means the purchase goes through, they get a tag called successful purchase, and then they get an email that says welcome. Pretty simple. So each one of these has one. So there's your content creation. So you can see that this one is also linked to a system action set. You could add something in here that says it's a new client, so on and so forth. The ones that I see, used most of the time is your successful, failed, and error. Now this one I like. So this one has a welcome template. I'm going to remove that. One of the things that I see most often is when you have a failed order is you can apply the tag called failed. So you would know that it's a failed order. And that way you can always follow up to make sure that things are taken care of, right? You can select. I could create the tag, so I could actually say that. And I could also send them an email that says your order has failed. And just for quickies here. I would send an order has failed and follow up with them on that so they understand that their order has failed. If you don't set up those actions, they may miss the fact that their order has failed, and they may be waiting for you to send them some additional information that they don't know, but the order didn't go through. Okay. An error. And an error could be that they didn't maybe didn't complete some of the fields, maybe it's the wrong answer. So error and failed are pretty close, but I would take what you've done on the failed purchase and also put it on the error purchase as well, because most of the times they're the same. So I could go in here and I could actually put on, where's my, right? And then I could go in here. And now in this instance, do I want to send them an email or not? It depends. And I'm going to get a good definition between error and failed when I reach out to Infusionsoft, see if I can get a really good description of the difference, because one I've read doesn't really clear it up to me. I just want to know what the differences are so I can clarify it for you and make you understand when you want to apply a tag or send an email based on whether it's a failed purchase and error, okay? And then, like I said, you have all of these actions. Now, each one of these is going to have a default action set. You don't want to remove those. Now, you can also do this by product. So if they buy let's say somebody buys a membership program with you, you can have a specific action set that sends them a welcome email that also maybe puts them, now, if you use Customer Hub, which is Infusionsoft's membership platform, you could actually have a purchase action when they purchase a membership program that it automatically logs them in or signs them up for their membership in Customer Hub and then sends them the information. So you could actually link that together. You could also, when somebody purchases something, send them specific details on how to access the information, send them a ticket, send them an invoice, whatever it might be. So if you want to do product specific purchase actions, you would simply type the product name and you would click on actions. And so this would be the action set for a specific purchase. Now you can see that this one has a tag and a follow-up sequence. And then once again, it has specific rules. Now I can actually remove that if I want. And so that already has an action. Now I could actually do another one. So I could do one for Evernote training, for instance. Same thing. So I could go in here and I could do a follow-up sequence, or I could just do or I could do an action sequence. So remember, whenever you get in here, you have the option to do an action sequence, individual sequences, as well as follow-up sequences. So I can say that this is Evernote training, right? And then I could also go in And I could do this was a customer sequence. Okay, and now that's going to run every time they purchase it. So if you want to do specific products, whether it's a product or a subscription, you want to do it here. Okay, you want to type it in there. So actions, purchase actions allows you to control your action sets for specific type purchases. So this all has to do not with contacts necessarily, but with the actual purchase of the shopping cart. So these are your default options. Then you can also create actions for specific products or subscriptions. It is a best practice to set up some type of action, especially for the successful and the failed purchases. And same thing, you're going to map it out. What do you want to know? Maybe you want to send yourself an email if there's a failed purchase, or your client wants to know. All right, so same thing. What do you want to know if if a purchase goes through? What do you want to know if the purchase has failed? Right, so look at that whole kind of what's the end result? What are you looking to know when these things happen? Remember, you can put rules on all of these. And then billing automation is the last thing we're going to look at. And these are actions based on billing. And these are also trigger based, which means something has to trigger this in order to happen. And the most common ones that we see are credit cards and on purchases. And there are some default ones already set up for you. And these are also under e-commerce and billing automation. And you can see right here, billing automation, you can see here I have when a credit card auto charge attempt is made, when a credit card is going to expire after a successful purchase, in the shopping cart or an order form. So you've got successful purchase, I can't speak, under purchase actions, but you've also got one here. So you can choose a trigger type. So I can say, well, when a credit card auto charge attempt is made, right, I can add a trigger. Okay, and then from here, I can basically choose what happens. Okay, so what's the trigger? When an auto charge fails or is successful. So if an auto charge fails, what do you want to do? And notice that you can also do a set up a criteria. So when it fails, and what failure number is it? Or it's the last failure, or it's the first failure for this invoice, because it can recharge invoices more than once, which we'll look at next week. And then you can also set specific details. So if it's for a specific product. But right now I'm saying if an auto charge fails and it's the first failure for the invoice, what do you want it to do? Here's your actions. You can apply and remove a tag. You can set up a follow-up sequence. So can you see that there are certain things that it would be good practice to have a follow-up sequence for? Okay. Or you could just simply send an email directly and saying, okay, I'm going to send them an email, right? And then I'm going to save that. Okay, and you can add additional. So you could actually put a trigger on, or you could put a tag on there. You could also create a task, right? And the task, how many tasks? I could actually create a task that says, okay, right? And then I could say, be sure to call this person to make sure we got their credit card information correctly. So I could set that up as well. Okay. And I could save that as well. So now there's two things. So, oops. Oh no, there's my task. So I'll send my task and also send an email. So the task sets up for the team member to call the person about the failure, and then it also sends them an email to let them know as well. And then I can save. Okay, so you can see when credit card. So these are the options that you have. These are the three options that you have. You can't create more. Those are the three that come in our standard. And then if you want to change one of these, you would simply highlight it and you can either add trigger. So which one was this one? After successful purchase. So from here, do you want to do any purchase, a specific purchase, or a specific purchase in a category? So I could say, okay, well, if they buy a live boot camp, for instance, maybe I want to send them their login details or how they can access their goodies, right? So I can choose any purchase, a specific purchase, or a specific category purchase. And then same thing, right? I can go in and add and remove tags. I could do a follow-up sequence. and save. Okay, so anytime you want to change these, you would simply click actions and make whatever changes you wanted to them. Okay. So remember actions, this one's for fail or is successful. So I could change one to successful, and I could say if the purchase is successful, what do I want to do then? Okay. Same thing. If you'll notice, this whole section was on automation. It's best if you map the whole thing out so you understand what the end result is. Without the end result, it's really hard to come up with the steps that you need in order to deliver, whatever it is the action set's supposed to do, or the follow-up sequence, or any of these actions that we've looked at. So map out your billing automation. And also, it's a best practice to have something in place when these things happen. And that way the client is aware, and you're letting your team know. A lot of times clients have teams, letting the team know that there's something up with billing, because sometimes things go so fast and furious, you might miss something, and you really want to stay on top of that. All right, so our homework for this section is I would like you to create an action set and a follow-up sequence and just play. Take the time to understand all the different pieces that are involved in each of these, because I'm going to come up and ask you to do some specifics in that mock project I talked about. Create a rule. So remember, for anything that we've done today, you can create that rule, that what if. I'd like you to create a rule for either an action set or a follow-up sequence, whichever one you want. I just want you to understand how they work. Assign your follow-up sequence and your action set to a web form, or if you want to assign it to a contact, you're welcome to do that as well. Create a product purchase action. So go in and assign a specific action to a specific product purchase. And then just to have a look at the billing automation features so you can kind of get an idea of what those look like. So we did action sets, follow-up sequences, purchase actions, and billing automation. So today was all about automation. Now remember, action sets and follow-up sequences are also part of campaigns, so we will be revisiting those when we get to that more advanced campaign module, which is coming up in a few weeks. So thank you, everybody. Remember, if you need any help, send us an email, help@techiementor.com. Reach out to us in the private Facebook group. And thank you again for your patience and your flexibility. It is much appreciated by me. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye.